We're here.
Hi, socialites.
Got lots of people rolling in still.
Yeah, welcome to the live. I've been trying to say hello to people. Have natural healing here. OCD Shaggy, you're back up in the club.
Yeah, OCD, I don't know if you noticed.
Hi, Liz.
I missed the tomato just a little bit once, and I hit just the edge of it, and it launched into Keri, and in typical Keri fashion, she picked it up and threw it back at me. That little noise thing you heard, that was me saying sorry as she was throwing it back at me. So, classic Keri.
Hello, Lady Di 2, Audrey C. Good to see you. Mary Holt, hello. Chaos Injustice System.
Too fast for fleas? Yes, that was a watermelon. Well, the first few were tomatoes, but they weren't staining right. We weren't getting enough stuff, so I had to jump to the watermelons.
Hello, Terry Martin. And we have someone who said they just binge watched all of our episodes. The comments are going too fast and I couldn't see, but thank you so much for binge watching. Kelly, thank you so much for binge watching that.
Oh, yeah. If nobody has watched that episode, Shooting Baby Jesus, it's true. I'm going to hell. What episode was that?
I don't know. It felt like a
Hey, Kelly, do you remember what episode that was? I'm totally spacing what episode, but yeah, I had an accidental discharge one night and fired my gun without intent, and I killed baby Jesus. I have to watch the episode for more.
And Dar Swear definitely is aware of Gallagher. Glenna Trogdon. I'm sorry, Glenna Trogdon is aware of Gallagher.
I'm sorry, Lady Di. That sounds like a rough day right there. Oh, it was on Hamerside, Kelly. Oh, well, we're going to talk about Hamerside tonight.
That Laura Chick, I am perfectly well. Thank you so much for checking on my welfare.
Stop it.
No one else checked on my welfare since then. Thank you.
I covered you up really well. So we're going to change one thing tonight. The sweatshirt question is going to come early tonight. So here's the deal. There's one person on this chat, and I'm not going to say who because it'll kind of give it away. You know who you are. You are disqualified from the beginning. You should not or will not answer this. However, for the rest of you, September 8th is a very important day for Socialite Crime Club. Whoever can figure out why September 8th is such an important day for Socialite Crime Club, by the end of this episode, you get a sweatshirt and a hat or beanie or something else we'll figure out. Maybe it's a coffee mug or something. It's going to be the big one. We're going to do, see, I knew, Susan, you be quiet. You cheated. But for the rest of you, if you can figure out why September 8th is such a big day for Socialite Crime Club. In fact, it's a big enough day that I changed my drink tonight.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Ro.
We're having an aviation.
Colder Covered is up here with us today. Yeah, and Cy poured me a Bordeaux for our special occasion today.
Okay, the other thing I have to throw out there, socialites, hang in.
Heavy Metal Rehab.
Holy crap, LA, you are so close, but no.
Heavy Metal Rehab got it first.
No, they didn't.
Anniversary.
This is the second episode that you have screwed up our free giveaway.
How did I screw it up? She guessed it.
It's hard, socialites, when it's live, because when we record and Keri does something like this, I usually start with, God damn it, Keri, and we redo the take. But in this particular case,
what did I do? How did I mess that up?
It is not our 1 year anniversary.
Oh, no, it's not our 1 year anniversary.
Good luck.
No, it just said anniversary. It didn't say 1 year. It just said anniversary.
Well, now you just told everybody. Yes, it's our anniversary today. Not our Socialite Crime Club anniversary, our anniversary.
We forgot about it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to tell Keri to not mention anything next time.
Sorry,
all right.
I'm not allowed to give answers anymore.
Oh, Heavy Metal Rehab. I didn't say 1 year. All
no,
right.
she didn't.
Nice recovery.
That's what I said.
Nice. Yes, there you go, Ron Boots. It's our wedding anniversary, and we're spinning it with you. Except for Keri is cooking a really kick-ass dinner right now. So if she bails out here in just a minute.
I have 9 minutes and 23 seconds. I just have to go.
Susan, we have been together for 11 years?
Yeah. 12 years now.
Feels like
together.
6 months, maybe.
Yeah. Don B.
Kevin fan. Sorry to hear that.
Dar Square and Star Trek anniversaries today. Star Trek anniversary?
OCD. Shaggy.
I didn't know.
Yes, she did deserve that tomato throw. You have no idea.
OCD Shaggy.
All right, let's get into it. We've wasted. Oh, I need to make another disclaimer.
You were one of my favorites, OCD Shaggy.
Up to this point.
Not anymore.
So, see, there we are, having Wi-Fi issues. Okay, so here's what I've got to give you guys a little background. Our house is in the middle of nowhere. And when I say nowhere, I mean nowhere. So there is no actual Wi-Fi. We can't get internet. The only thing we could get here would be like the old 1996 dial-up. So we have Starlink, and we have this crazy Wi-Fi Verizon repeater that I've been working on. We're going to switch back and forth. I've almost got this fixed. The last part that we ordered, it has not come in yet. So I'm hoping by next week, we're going to have this new Wazoo thing that we can do. But if we try to do these from our home, we're not in the studio. We just have terrible Wi-Fi. So we are working on it. We're aware. I've got a lot of comments this last week on how people, heavy metal, we are the same. We live in a town where there are 62 full-time residents. Nobody commits crime here. Everybody leaves their doors unlocked. It's the best place in the world.
Everybody carries a gun and is scared of being mauled by a bear.
Exactly. Yeah. Bear mauling is probably the best chance of you actually being victimized here. The one thing we have an issue with Starlink is about every 35 to 40 minutes, we don't know when it's going to come, we switch little satellites and we get that little bump. So bear with us. We are working on a solution. I think we have it fixed by next week, but we might jump back and forth. But with that, let's get on this. Let's start doing some cool stuff.
Bears are good people.
Oh, tell them the bear story while I load this up.
Which bear story?
Last year.
Last year?
What happened last year in the community? It was a big conspiracy. The bees.
Oh, so last year in our community. Hi, Maddie Medusa. It's good to see you. We had a bear that was going around and he would knock over everybody's garbage cans. And if you didn't have food in your garbage can, he would come up onto your porch and start knocking over all your hummingbird feeders. But he was just a jerk bear. He just wanted to create chaos and make a mess in everybody's properties. So anything that he could knock over, I guess she could have been a she bear too, but anything
I suspect it was a she bear.
Anything the bear could knock over, it was just wreaking havoc on everybody's property. So
I know that bear.
Yeah. So it's good to see everybody tonight, and we are glad to start this live of Blood Spatter and maybe even talk a little bit about domestic violence. First and foremost, I wanted to talk and compliment and thank everybody who shared great comments about our last episode, and people who also shared their stories with life experiences with domestic violence, whether it was physical violence or coercive control and manipulation. We appreciate your courageousness and ability to share your stories so others might learn from them. So thank you very much, everybody.
Communication is the key.
It is.
Knowledge is power, and the more we can get out there, the better we can do. So with that, let's jump back a little bit about this week's episode. Sorry if it offended anybody. I don't suspect anybody in this one's going to be offended, but we did have a little bit more gory photos. Hey, by the way, shout out to Bree. How awesome was it that she took her little pencil and she drew digitally all of our photographs to take the gory pieces out so we could actually get them into YouTube, because YouTube has really crazy rules about dead bodies. And I'm going to throw one out tonight, but I'm hoping because it's live, maybe they won't see as much. But big shout out to Bree. She killed it this week on being able to get us to show you guys some of those pictures. She's amazing. So with that, I wanted to recap and go back a little bit. Across the top of the screen, what you're seeing here is different blood drops. And the idea is the degree of the impact underneath, like the 90, 80, 70, 60 that you see there. So 90, obviously, straight down.
Keep your finger in frame.
80, a little bit more. 60, 50, 40, 30, 10. You get it. The idea here is that when we get on scene and we start seeing these little blood drops, you can actually measure them. And Keri and I have both been to quite a bit of training where you have to go and they give you these crazy scenarios and you have to get out your little ruler and you measure them by the width and the length. And there's a formula you can put in, and you take the width and the length and you basically exchange this formula, the W and the L, with the formula, and it gives you the angle of impact. And what this allows us to do is actually see the angle of impact. And why that's important is we can actually completely reconstruct reconstruct the crime scene with the blood evidence. It's really cool.
And what's fun about the training that you get to go to in law enforcement when you do go to blood spatter training is that they create multiple crime scenes for you. And you're walking into a cold crime scene with blood spatter everywhere. They actually use pig blood for these scenarios because it's very, very close to what human blood is like. And they'll use it in different ways, that they splash it around a room or a particular area, and they'll create a crime scene essentially that you have to go in and figure out what happened. You have to recreate the crime by what the blood is telling the story of. So it's a lot of fun.
So what's kind of cool here is if you look at this little picture I have at the bottom right, and I'm going to try to explain this a little bit with what Keri was just saying. One of those scenarios, they'll take like a stick or a bat or some type of a piece of pipe, and they'll put blood on the end of it, and they'll sit there and swing it back and forth, and we get what's called cast off. And what's really crazy about cast off is you can tell by the direction. Like if you look at the 10-degree one up at the top, you can tell the direction that one was traveling, right? So the idea here is you measure all of these little things, the width and the height, you plug in your little formula and it gives you the angle of impact, and then you run a string basically from that drop on the ground or the floor or the ceiling off at an angle with the direction of travel. And at some point you're going to have what we call a point of convergence. And this little diagram that I have right here, what we're looking at right here is the point of convergence. And you can start to figure out like, hey, the suspect had to be standing right here while he was swinging a bat or when he fired the gun. And then, of course, you can also take some voids into consideration there, and you can really get really, really accurate with this stuff. Where I've seen this be really, really helpful.
Remind them what voids are.
I've got a picture here in a minute.
Okay, good.
What makes this really significant for crime scenes is a lot of times we can determine if somebody was left or right-handed, exactly where they were standing in the crime scene when this was happening. If we go back to Hamerside, which somebody mentioned earlier with That's When I Killed Baby Jesus, in Hamerside, we were able to tell that her initial story was complete BS, and we could actually put her standing on the side of the bed when all that trauma was happening. And if those of you who've seen Hamerside, this was the case where she said she was underneath and he was underneath him, and he was trying to rape her, and she reached over and she grabbed the hammer and she started hitting him. But when we did the blood spatter on that case, we could clearly see she was standing on the side of the bed based off the cast off. So it's just a really good example of the blood evidence and what you can do with that. You were talking about I should show a void pattern.
Yeah.
This is what a void pattern looks like. It was just a pair of scissors that was on the ground, but they were moved, right? So all of this blood happened, and then you took something out of the scene, and it's really, really obvious. If you think about this, forget the scissors for a second, and think about it as a person. As a person is moving around a crime scene when this is happening, you can actually detect those voids that a person is causing as well. And our little tomato fruiting that I gave Keri, that really good fruiting earlier on, you saw her raising her arms up a bunch of times. I was actually telling her to do that so that we could create the void, but it didn't work so well. I kind of figured it wouldn't work well because she didn't want to use actual pig blood, but I figured it'd be fun to smash fruit on her all the same. So I was like, yeah, this will be fine, babe. Just take it. There's another really good void where we could see the change.
I'll be back.
Keri's cooking a really cool dinner, so you're going to have to just give her a second. She'll be back in a minute. Uh-oh, I'm solo. I'll try not to screw it up, babe. Okay, so when I said earlier, you can start to attach strings. Hey, don't worry, Maddie. I'll play it again for you. It was in our very beginning. This is old school. This is super, super old school. So back in the day, when you would measure the width and the length, and you'd put it in your formula, and it would give you the angle of impact, you could go back and you could actually run these strings to different areas, and you could weight them, and then you could take a picture. And this is an example of that. And if you notice, all of these different strings kind of all come together in one point. That is the source of the blood. Yeah, you're telling me, OCD. You're telling me. But this is when I'm talking about the strings. This is the piece we're talking about. There's really cool three-dimensional software now that does this for you, where you can put your picture into the software and you can run these strings in there, and then you can actually create these three-dimensional diagrams that you can move around and look at. So this is super old school. This is how Keri and I learned. The new programs, they're really, really awesome. This is transfer. I know we talked about transfer patterns in the shoes. Probably the most significant things we see on crime scenes is transfer patterns when it comes to shoes and whatnot. So this is where we can actually start to determine where people are and what they're doing and all that good stuff. There's a little diagram that I put together. Well, I didn't put together. I stole it off the internet, but I went out and got it to kind of put back to you guys. When we talk about different things, there's a bunch of different types of blood flow and pooling and spatter, and there's this cast-off spatter, and there's arterial spatter. Arterial is when somebody cuts an actual artery and it spurts, and it makes a very, very Jen, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen.
And it makes this really cool, distinct pattern on the wall. There's no avoiding it. I've probably seen this about 4 or 5 different crime scenes that I've worked, and you'll start to work a lot of crime scenes like this, and you get used to being around blood, and then you see one like this, and you're like, oh, that's different. I'm talking about this arterial spurt right up here. That's bad. Typically, you have a major artery, you're going to be in trouble very quickly there. And we could spend. Did you do the 40-hour or did you do the 3 day?
I did the 40-hour, I think.
Yeah, I could spend 3 weeks talking about blood spatter, but I just wanted to kind of put some of this in context for what we were talking about. But I don't want to leave you guys out in the dark. So we have a couple cases we're going to talk about too. One, if you haven't seen Hamerside, this was early, so forgive us if we weren't quite hitting our jam at that point. But episodes 4 and 5, we made a mistake. You guys have spoken. We've learned. We don't do this anymore, but it was a long enough one that we thought it was going to be around 2 hours. So instead of doing it as one episode, we did it as 2. And then we heard everybody's cussing us about don't ever make us wait another week to finish it again. So now we just do long episodes. We could care less. With that said, if you haven't watched Hamerside yet, very, very bloody crime scene. You can get into that one as well. Now, this week's case that we're going to talk about on the live, the OJ Simpson case. And we were talking about this just before the episode.
He's the black version of you.
Yeah, I've been called Black OJ when I wear my little hat. Anyway.
I think you look more like OJ than Joe Rogan for sure.
I don't look like either one of them. Okay, so Lady Di, I hope that wasn't a comment on that. How dare you? That's not where I was headed. 94. OJ was 94. Do you know how long ago that was?
That was, I was still in high school.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Long damn time ago. Yeah, still in high school. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. Now, for those of you queasy or anything else, we just got to throw that over. Hey, I've got some. Thank you, Kevin. Oh, wait. Kevin fan, you better be female.
He is. Sai is better looking.
No, I saw earlier. Agree. You are. No, wait. She is female. I'm good. Okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
I tell Keri all the time, the only people that find me attractive are gay men and old women. So not that I have any issue with either one of them. It's just not my type.
How do you know?
Because
how do you know Kevin fan is old?
I don't. No, I don't. I'm saying thank you because I suspect she's probably in her late to early 30s. She's probably smoking hot. See, she is a female. She was probably a swimsuit model back in the day.
Or still is.
Yeah, good.
She was probably on the cover of Sports Illustrated last week and you don't even know it.
Yeah. So, yes, thank you so much. All right. So, OJ, 30 years ago, you got to remember, though, that...
or middle school teacher, whichever.
You got to remember that blood spatter was, I won't say it was new, but DNA, like there's some different things here. Oh, Jesus. True. Make me feel old. All right, let's just get into it. All right, if you guys are queasy with bodies and blood, you shouldn't be here. That's my disclaimer of this week. This is Nicole Smith. Off to the right, you can't see it. In the bushes is Ron. I have a better diagram picture here that I'll show you in a minute. But if you think about, and I just want to show this one briefly, look at all of that blood. I mean, it is literally running down the cracks of the tile or the terracotta there. It gives you an idea of just how bloody a scene can be. And if you think about it on today's forensic standards, this is a gold mine of evidence. If this was processed today, OJ Simpson absolutely would have been convicted. I can tell you 100 times over. By the way, any of you doubters, he is the suspect. I'm going to show you how we know that here in just a little bit. But this is a faraway picture, kind of looking from the sidewalk going up to that front. I do have a picture, and I'm going to come back to this. And while all of you might be more attracted to looking at where the body is, there's a couple things that you have to take into consideration here. Where B, the arrow of B is pointed. Notice that's the second step. Blood does not run uphill. This is a tall tale sign right off the bat that a trained investigator can look at. This body has been moved after the initial incident. So whatever happened here, there was a lot of blood that happened on that first step, and then her body is moved to where it's positioned. So right off the bat, we know that we have either a stage scene or maybe for some reason the body is positioned after. Right above the B, I'm going to watch the comments for a minute. See those 3 linear lines? Anybody that has an idea what that might be, let me know. That is very significant to this case as well. Those 3 linear lines right above the letter B. I'm going to go back to this one here. So now we can talk about this a little bit more. You can see Nicole and Ron, very, very similar injuries on both of them, by the way. You just can't see Ron because he's kind of off in the bushes. Let's see. I'm going to give fingers close, Meg, but not run those bodies in the corner. So yes, fingers, heavy metal, hand smear. So close. We'll come back to this. I'll let everybody talk about this a little bit. Okay, zoomed in picture on Nicole's back. And if we go back to the very beginning of our presentation, look at 90, 80, 70, maybe even 60, right? But definitely not 30, 20, or 10. If you think 90, 80, 70, 60, and then really commit to 20 and 10, when we get to this picture here, especially when we start looking at like this mark down here, this over here, like see this one could be probably a 10. Lots of stuff going on. This one up here probably has a little bit of directionality. But notice these that are close to perfect circles around this area. And what's going on here is while she's laying there and she's already deceased, she's laying still, blood is being deposited at her at a 90 degree, 80 degree, 70 degree angle. How can that happen? Somebody is standing above her, and for some reason, we have blood that is dripping onto her after the fact. Now, we all know OJ Simpson cut his finger pretty severely the same day that this murder happened. Anybody who gets into a knife fight, typically, it's not unusual at all for them to sustain some type of knife injury. It's very common when we are dealing with suspects on a crazy stabbing. So yes, heavy metal rehab, you are right on the money. Standing over her is correct. However, the problem we have here is we're talking 1994. The medical examiner showed up. They put her in a body bag, and they took her to the medical examiner's office without sampling any of this blood on her back.
Was it the coroner's office or the medical examiner's office?
It's one and the same there, yeah.
A lot of people will ask what the difference is between them.
Today, we would have swabbed all of those off of her back at the crime scene, but in 1994, they just took her to the medical examiner. Well, she's got severe cuts. When they put her in the body bag and they put her obviously on her back, the rest of the blood saturates. By the time they get her to the medical examiner's office and they get her out of the body bag, all of this blood is gone. I fully suspect that if they would have properly sampled this blood and done a DNA test back in 1994, by those standards, to OJ Simpson, it probably would have tested positive. But lessons learned. Luckily, law enforcement's gotten a lot better since then. This is the one that'll blow you guys away. All the blood in the Bronco. Those of you who were around and not 1 year or 2 years old at the time, this was a great thing. This was one of the first crime scenes that kind of folded out in front of the entire national media. We saw OJ's pursuit in real time. The trial was broadcast in real time. And I know today that's not a big deal at all. But back then, this was the first case that really attracted that, hey, there's a primetime television play here. But if we get into the Bronco, you can see these little markers, 21, 22, 23. All those are blood stains that are a mixture of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown. So that is her blood and his blood inside of OJ's Bronco. If you go a little further here, 31 and 32, same thing. And what you're seeing with 32, if you think about a driver who puts their hand over the console there and is resting their hand between the console and the passenger seat, that's Nicole's and Ron's blood. On the passenger seat, there is a line that looks very, very similar to these three lines. Same length, very, very close in description about how they're described. What this is the knife. He's done. The knife is super bloody. He taps the knife 3 times on the concrete, trying to get all the blood off of the knife. He then runs back to the Bronco, gets in the Bronco to drive away. He puts the knife in the passenger seat, and we get another line that matches these 3 lines on basically the seat portion of the passenger seat. Why that is so interesting to us is there's a blonde hair, and that blonde hair is mixtured around and actually dried in the blood when they seized it. They test that blonde hair. It also comes back to Nicole. So a lot of you should be thinking, hang on. If you're telling me they arrest him, they get into his car. In his car, they have Ron Goldman and Nicole's blood and Nicole's hair that's dried in a linear mark that matches the knife. Like, what the hell? How in the world does OJ Simpson not get convicted of this? And this is a really good lesson for law enforcement to learn. It doesn't matter how great the evidence is. If you screw up the case, there are implications that can be raised at trial that can absolutely impact the jury. It can also erase evidence. In this particular case, there's a lot of errors that are made between the crime scene and the medical examiner's office. Some of this has to do with estimating the amount of blood that was sampled. And basically what happens here is crime scene tech, and he's a good guy, he knew his stuff, but he just made a terrible mistake. At the time of autopsy, he was realizing how much blood they had at the house and in the Bronco. So he calls the crime scene tech who's at the autopsy and tells the crime scene tech, hey, make sure you get a vial of blood from Nicole. We're going to need it for testing for DNA. So this crime scene tech who's at the autopsy tells the medical examiner, hey, we need a vial of blood for DNA testing. So they get blood, not a lot of blood, but they get a little bit of blood. They put it in this test tube. They cork it up. They put the little stopper in there, and they hand it to her. She estimates how much blood is in there by cc's by just looking at it. Terrible. Don't ever do this. Then the second mistake she makes, the crime scene supervisor who's requesting this blood is in OJ's house, where they find more blood, mainly Nicole's. She drives from the medical examiner's office to OJ's house to give the vial of blood to the lead crime scene tech who is currently processing the house inside. As this goes on, hey, remind me to come back to Mark Fuhrman, Heavy Metal Lab. I've got a little trivia question here that will really blow everybody's mind. But what happens here is this crime scene tech takes this blood from the medical examiner's office, goes to OJ's house, hands it to the crime scene supervisor who's processing OJ's house. The problem they have here is they just introduced the victim's blood into the suspect's house. She estimated how many cc's of blood was in the test tube. When they sent it to the lab for testing, they did an actual measurement, and the actual measurement is far less than what she estimated. So the defense was able to say, hey, they took blood from the medical examiner's office. They brought it to the crime scene. They estimated how much blood they had when they went to the crime scene, but when they submitted that same vial of blood for DNA testing at the lab, it had significantly less blood in it. It was just a mistake. It was a common mistake, but you get the right defense team. You get people who know what they're talking about. These little mistakes, ooh, that's a big issue. They were able to convince the jury that absolute corruption was happening here and that the deck was loaded against OJ from the beginning. Most of the blood evidence was dismissed. It was also 1994. People didn't look at DNA and blood evidence the same way they do today. I want to circle back because Mark Fuhrman, the detective, right? He was racist. They had him on audio tape making horrible racist slurs. It's terrible, right? Does anybody know how they had those audio tapes? I mean, think about it. This is 1994. There's no body cams. There's very little anything else audio recording wise. Maybe in a interview, So how did they get Mark Fuhrman making racial slang terms on audio? And very few people know this, but Mark Fuhrman actually wanted to be an actor. That's why he was in LA. It wasn't a wire. Mark Fuhrman was actually reading a script for a movie. He wanted to get brought on as an actor for a movie, and he was literally not Twiz. You weren't born. Don't worry about it. He literally was reading a script of a movie where he was playing the role of somebody who was racist. And they used this in court to say, oh, look, he said this. And it's a good thing that we can talk about this a little bit. When you're on the stand, you're really limited on what you can say and not say. So a really good defense attorney or prosecutor can kind of pigeonhole you a little bit to say, hey, is it true that you said this? And if you say, no, I never said that, well, now they can they can impeach you. And it allows them to play a clip of an audio tape without even asking you a question. So now the jury hears this and they're like, all right, he said it. He's a liar. So there's a lot of games that can be played with this, but that's a great case with OJ where really good evidence, but it just didn't work out. So there's our very quick OJ case. DV, what did you want to get into with DV?
Well, first, thank you for everybody who checked out the links that we have for DV and asked a lot of great questions about DV. I kind of already touched on that, thanking everybody if you came in late and you are someone who commented on your life experiences with DV or someone you know. We appreciate you because any information out there is great information about it, especially if it helps somebody else in their own situation or learn more about it. So thank you.
Yeah, Lana, you were asking about yes or no questions, 100%. I get that all the time on the stand. And I tell people when I'm teaching how to testify in court, as soon as you start getting yes and no questions, you better be ready because the defense or the prosecution is setting you up. If you start getting, isn't it true, yes or no, or any of those, like prefacing the question, isn't it true that X, Y, Z, or yes or no?
There's no open-endedness to it.
They are very much trying to lead you down a path so that you don't say the whole story, that you just keep it in this little thing. So typically what I will do is I will tell the attorney that I'm working with on that case that, hey, if I start getting yes or no questions and I answer hang on, we're back. But I'll actually tell the attorney, if you hear me say yes or no, and I'm happy to explain why, come back and clean it up on redirect or recross. There's a reason I'm trying to say that. Meg P, I don't ever testify that I don't recall. I hate that. There's so many ways that you can explain, hey, I don't have perfect recollection of it, but this is what I remember. I mean, the whole point of cops being there is you're being paid to recall. And that's why you write police reports and you make all kinds of crazy comments and notes and all that. All right, let's jump on to some questions. I do have a question I want. Who asked this? Do you remember?
It was Smarter Than the Average Joe. Thank you for joining us tonight and coming on to our live. Yeah, I already said hi to him earlier in chat, but he asked a great question in our comments in YouTube earlier this week. And he basically asked Cy how Cy started the Trax program, what that coding looked like. And he was just interested in that. So Cy is going to get into a little bit of technology background of how Trax came to be.
Yeah, so as far as the technical side, I was not a tech guy at all. I learned how to do this stuff as a matter of I needed to do it for my job. The first version of Trax, you're not going to believe this, was actually written in Excel. I did a lot of macros where I could drop, because everything was coming as an Excel file or like a CSV file. So I wrote it where that it would sort and parse the data the way I wanted it in Excel. And then I wrote it from there. I had a little program, a little script that would write it to keyhole markup language. And usually that's a curveball for most programmers because that is a specific language that's only read by Google Earth. It's proprietary to Google and Google Earth. It worked really well when I was an officer, but at some point I had to scale that. So we hired people and they wrote the original ones in Ruby, if that matters to anybody. We did a lot of stuff in Ruby initially with some Python. And then ultimately we went to Golang, which is Google language, just because it's so much more efficient. You can do a lot more with a lot less.
Over time, the Trax system started evolving with different languages to keep up with the amount of like additions that we were adding to Trax and the amount of data that was coming in from law enforcement across the country. So we went to Golang because it was just a far more efficient coding language with the amount of data that we were working with.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to knock out a bunch of questions here. It is spatter, not splatter. Heavy metal rehab, 100%. That's the first thing I know when I hear cops talking about splatter. They don't know what they're talking about. It's also one of the first things you learn in blood spatter school. They say, this is not splatter, it's spatter. Don't let us hear you ever referring to it as splatter. So shoe print blood is an excellent indicator of cleanup. It could be. It depends on where you're seeing those shoe patterns. So shoe patterns are important, but more importantly, it does tell us that a shoe came after all the blood is deposited. The other thing is the directionality of that. So it can be a big thing. Yes, off of cast off, especially if we have really good cast off. In Hamerside, we had it on the bed, the wall, and the ceiling. And when you run all those strings back, you get your point of convergence of the bat. So then you can test it with a similar bat, or in that case, it was a hammer. We can test it with a hammer, and we could figure out she is 5 feet 2 inches tall. So yes, you can absolutely do that. Dual dominance. I'm lost. Hey, hit me up with a bet. I'm lost. Fill in the gaps for me. Are you
Thanks,
there?
Star Square. Yeah, I'm not sure about dual dominance either.
Oh.
Aw, thank you, Simple Me. Happy birthday to your daughter.
Another call out to Jen. You're awesome. We love you.
Yes, thank you, Jen.
Are there any medical conditions which can significantly alter the way one blood spatters? Not really, because most spatter, what a lot of people don't realize is the medical condition that, let's say you're anemic, you won't be able to detect that in blood spatter. It's such a minute detail that obviously it affects your health, but when we're looking at spatter, it doesn't. The other thing is like the type of blood, all that's out. And you can actually replicate this. It's the viscosity of blood, the thickness of blood that really matters with blood spatter. Oh yeah, we'll skip through that one. We hit that one. Only a fool has themselves as an attorney. Just kidding, Lamma. Someone's got to give you a hard time. Ask the questions, can I object to? Yeah, that's actually a really good way to go. Nice job, Lana. I'm in the grocery store now, so unfortunately I'll have to watch the replay. What are we buying? Oh, hey, we need to hit this. We are not making London this year. Tell them why we can't go to London. It's your fault.
This is not my fault. I wanted to go to London, and then Sai said we actually have to go do some travel in California for work. So unfortunately, we will not be in London, which I'm really sad about because I was really hoping to meet Harsh. And I know that we had some socialites asking if we were going to be in London, very much like Perry. And we had somebody else contact us too from Ireland. Was it Ireland?
Yeah.
He's from Ireland, and he was asking if we were going to be at CrimeCon. So I'm really sad that we can't make it.
Yeah, and contrary to maybe some popular belief, I actually am still very active. I'm working multiple cases right now. I have a lot of testimony coming up. Most of it, nobody on here will recognize. We'll start doing some of those cases, but I've got gag orders on all of them, so I'm not going to talk about them. But we have to testify and travel for testimony on a fairly regular basis. So sorry, London. Next year. Yes. Explain the deer.
Oh,
quickly.
This is our deer. Actually, Sai bought this little deer in the background. We were traveling through Wyoming, and we ended up in Jackson Hole. And there was this cute little store in there that we passed by, and something in there caught Sai's eye, and it was this deer head. And he went in there and just bought it.
Well, it was a set of them, and I'm convinced they were carved somewhere in Germany, Bavaria time frame, like late 1700s, early 1800s, but we haven't been able to run that down yet. I think it was one of those buys. We got it really cheap because people just thought it was silly, but I think they're actually, the ears are leather, and you can see a little tongue there, right there. It's also leather. All right, moving on. Good indicators of cleanup: swirls. It is so hard to hide swirls in blood stains. If you move blood at all with a rag or your hand, or you just try to wipe it, it's super obvious. What a lot of people don't realize, even if you use like Clorox and you wipe it really good, and then you spray that with like a luminol or a Blue Star, or some type of reagent that will cause it to react, you can see those swirls after the fact. So swirls is probably your biggest indicator of a cleanup. When did AT&T switch from Nellis to Locabor? Twiz, look at you doing the deep dive. It was over a period of time, depending on where you're at in the country. They never roll anything out just nationwide all of a sudden. Typically, we'll see it go through. I would say, let's say late 2020 through 2022, they had finished. So 2022, it was pretty much throughout the country. Have you ever seen law enforcement or detective testify to Trax and they falsely misrepresented it? Lady Di too. I love this question.
That is a great question.
Let's go a little history.
We talked about this a little bit.
I was going to try to knock out a bunch of questions tonight, but I got to stop on this one because I want people to hear this because I haven't explained this much. A lot of times I'll get a subpoena to come testify somewhere and I won't know the details of that case. I've changed this practice since then. And I got a subpoena to come testify just outside of Boston in Everett, Massachusetts. And I'm on the stand, and it's a case that is challenging the accuracy of Trax. And the defense attorney hands me a document, and on that document, it's a screenshot of Trax, but somebody has added an arrow, and they're pointing to the crime scene. And then they have another arrow or something like that was pointing somewhere else saying where the suspect was. And I testified in that case, this is not what Trax does. You can't use the Trax program to identify the suspects here because they just had a tower connection. They didn't have anything else. And my actual testimony in that case was, if this exhibit ever made it in front of a jury, nobody in the courtroom did their job today. And obviously the judge suppressed that exhibit. People love to tout to this day that that's one of the cases that Trax was discredited in court and Trax was suppressed. Trax was not suppressed. The exhibit that was made because it was falsely misrepresenting evidence and details of that case was suppressed. So I love it when I get attorneys that'll ask me on the stand, isn't it true that Trax has been suppressed? And I'll start talking about that one, and I'll explain that one was suppressed, but it was suppressed off of my testimony because it was falsely represented. So great job, Lady Di. Yes, I have seen it before. It's rare. I will say most of the SMEs that we have within the Trax program are awesome people. They do great work. They're just really good. So,
well, I think the other thing to remember is that when people buy Trax, or before they even buy Trax, they go through a 40-hour training to learn how to use Trax and best practices to present that information in court so that you don't get cases suppressed or any type of evidence suppressed.
Yeah, and then we give them a bunch of casework. So you have to go to the 40-hour basic, then you go to a 40-hour advance, and then we give you a bunch of cases after the 40-hour advance that you have to work through. You have to submit your work to a team of the cadre who actually go through it, make sure you're doing it right. It takes about a year to finish those cases. When you're finally to your certification to testify, you've got significant training on it at that point. Yes, it can, if they're all swinging something. We can't determine how many suspects, but we can determine locations of different things swinging, if you will. It's really hard with blood to be able to put an order of sequence. Typically, we're looking for something else to get that order. Sometimes we can do it if, say, the first event happens and there's a bunch of blood, and then like 30, 45 minutes later, there's a second incident. We can determine that order of operation. But if everything is happening within a couple minutes, it can be really, really difficult.
Thank you, Anna, for your contribution. We appreciate you.
Kevin Fan, if you didn't catch it, yes, it was the knife. He just got done killing both Ron and Nicole, and he was tapping the knife on the step to get it off. Anna, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Let me think of a good question. Y'all keep thinking. Blood verdict. Oh, Maddie, that is a great question. I had a case where, and this is all, we're starting to talk about really cutting edge new technologies. There are different things, and I'm going to totally screw this up. I am not an expert in this field, but I'm going to tell you what I heard and then how I perceived it in my head. There are ways to test now the way blood interacts post-mortem. And it's like, I want to say there's an enzyme that they can detect that is different than if you're alive. Now, I want to say it's not like you die and 2 seconds later you're bleeding and they can say. What I'm trying to say is somebody bleeds out, the body is moved and then repositioned, and there's more blood that's deposited. That second set of blood, whether it be 30 minutes, an hour, hours later, they can detect that. But it's got to be fairly significant. And again, I am not the expert in that field, but I've seen a couple cases where some super wicked smart forensic dude was able to figure it out, or chick. Dual dominant. Oh, that's me. Now I know what you're talking about. Dual dominant. So here's what's funny is I shoot right-handed. I write left-handed. Are you ready for this? I catch left-handed, and I throw left-handed. But that's because I grew up in a really screwed up public education that didn't have much money. And when we were playing baseball at recess, they only had the left or the right-handed gloves, right? Which is where you're catching with your left hand, you're throwing with your right hand. So I had to always use a left glove in baseball as a kid because we didn't have any right-handed gloves. So I would have to catch the ball with my left hand, throw the glove off, catch the ball, throw the ball. So yeah.
How do you golf? I don't remember.
Terribly. That's
no,
how
I'm in which side?
I golf right-handed.
You golf right.
Yeah. So
okay.
yeah. That comes back to, we would be able to tell, hey, the first 3 blows were left, the second 4 blows were right. It also depends on the crime scene, though. When I'm saying we can determine left or right, we can only determine left or right if there's other objects in the room that we can see interaction with. Like I'm standing next to the bed and I'm hitting somebody in the bed. And because of the cast off, the only way I could be doing this is if I'm holding the hammer in my left hand or the right hand. You take a perfectly sterile room, 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor, that would be really, really difficult. So it's also how it interacts with other things that are in the room and where the victim's positioned and all of these other different things. So there's a lot that can come into it.
Or maybe even identifying their trigger finger, pretty much like what was in the last episode when you saw the linear line on the suspect's trigger finger.
Oh, Helen, you're flirting. And here's what I will say to that. And I'm going to talk about a case that I did in 2016, Indiana.
I don't remember which one. You've done a lot of cases.
You got yelled at by the Grand Poobah.
Oh.
Is that 2016? Yeah, because we were in
No. I didn't get yelled at, but that was the when I was working.
That's where it started.
Oh.
I worked a case in 2016, and a lot of people really confuse testimony. So I'm going to talk specifically about a case I did in 2016 to make it really clear here. When you have an expertise and you're testifying as an expert, you are not there to testify, nor are you there to consult, presume, advocate on guilty or innocent. That's not your job. And when we create a justice system where people only take on cases because they're convinced somebody's either guilty or innocent, we have completely failed the criminal justice system. That's not how it works. There are certain rights that even the worst criminals in the world are entitled to. And as an expert, your job is to represent the evidence. And whatever that means and however the chips fall, it's irregardless. It has nothing to do with your testimony as an expert. So I don't take cases on because of guilt or innocence. I take cases on because I have an expertise in making sure that the jury understands what the evidence means and the proper legal process it takes to get that evidence, to use the evidence, to present that evidence, the scientific admissibility of it. And at the end of the day, if the jury finds that that person's guilty, then they're guilty. And at the end of the day, if they find that they're innocent, they're innocent. In 2016, I did have a case that I took on in which it looked very much so that this person was guilty, but we found an issue within the cellular network that caused some misreporting by that cellular provider. And the person was 100% innocent. But when I took on that case, it had nothing to do with guilt or innocence. It had to do with, I have an expertise that's a really rare expertise, by the way, trying to monetize this crap that I have. Nobody grows up saying, I want to be a cell phone expert when they're a kid. But to answer your question, 100%, you can't run cases like this. If you do, you're going to let your emotions impede your expertise. And I'm not there for my opinion. I'm not there because of how I feel about the case, about the defendant, about the victims, about the prosecutor, about the defense attorney. Nobody cares how I feel about that. It's simply representing the evidence in the most accurate and scientifically sound way, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
I would give one more example of something like this that happened, and it was actually an agency was calling us for help from Florida. And it was really early on in our company days, and Cy was looking at the records and actually told the agency, you've got the wrong guy. You're looking at the wrong evidence. And this agency was convinced they had the right suspect, but all of the evidence showed otherwise. Once I told them you have the wrong guy, we never got a call back from that agency.
Yeah, I've worked a number of cases where we have eliminated a suspect because of phone records. I also had a network that hired me to do some work on a documentary that they were filming because they were going to get this guy out of prison because they felt that he was innocent. And I reviewed all the records, and my work showed no, he was at the crime scene. So it was kind of
well, and often when defense attorneys do call you and ask you to look at records, he will look them over and he will tell them, I can come in and testify to these records, but I don't think you want me on the stand.
Yeah.
And then we never get a call back from the defense attorney either.
Which is okay. And sometimes with prosecutors. I've had prosecutors who do not want me to testify because I have a very different opinion of the case than they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Liz, we will be in Denver 2025. I was just looking at the other day. We're trying to do something a little bit more interactive. So those of you who ever go to CrimeCon, it's in Denver next year. I think it's in, help me out, Liz. It's either late May, I think, or early June.
I think it's September next year.
No, I think it's May or June.
Is it?
I think so. I think it's May or June. We are going to be there. We're going to try to come up with some type of a cool booth, though. We're going to do something a little different. So those of you can make it, come hang out with us. All right. Alana's got her question. Geofencing and geolocation. That's a great question. By the way, I'm going to plug this week's episode. It's
constitutional confusion.
I'm not going to go too far down the road, but we're dropping a bomb next week. You guys definitely want to watch Wednesday's episode. Wednesday's episode covers some new legal stuff that's happening when it comes to geofencing. And I think the implications are very far reaching. I hate what we are talking about next Wednesday. However, it's got legs. Prepare yourselves. It's going to change the face of criminal investigations today. It's actually really scary. So with that, we're going to talk a lot about geofencing next week. Wednesday's episode is focused 100% on geofencing. Geofencing is law enforcement's ability to take a shape, put it on a map, take a time frame. So I can draw a polygon around the property of your house where you own. And I can say, hey, Google, show me all of the devices you had that were registering within that shape within this period. So geofencing is taking a time and space and a physical location based on the size or the polygon and trying to query different data sets to say who was in that shape at that time. So,
well, what devices?
Yeah.
Were in that
and we can do that through a number of different resources. There's a ton of ways to do it. Geolocation, a lot of times I get asked in court, hey, what are you an expert in? I'm an expert in geolocation. And geolocation is taking some type of location data, whether it's GPS, cell site, cell sector information, a combination of 4 or 5 things, and being able to accurately predict where a device is at a particular time. And sometimes that estimation is within miles, and sometimes it's within meters. So geolocation is the physical location of a device. Geofencing is a search term over the whole thing. Excessive blood spatter trying to cover their tracks. I have seen it. What a lot of people don't realize is just how bloody some of these scenes get. It's not so much the excessive blood, it's blood they take with them that they don't realize that they took. That's probably the bigger one that we see. Big cleanups, it's obvious. Like, there's nothing better than a good cleanup because you can just pin the whole thing on. Not only did they do it, but then they tried to clean it up. It depends, Terry. Luminol kind of sucks. It's old school. There's a lot better reagents that react these days. But yes, you can still detect that. It's really hard to get all of the different enzymes within blood that react. So 100%. Hey, UK, what time is it there, Maria?
Hi,
Marie, go to bed. Watch us tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us from the UK.
No, you cannot buy. Well, when we had it, you could. LexisNexis purchased the Trax program from us, so we no longer own it. They only sell to law enforcement. That was a LexisNexis decision. We used to sell to defense, though.
Where would a potential customer go for this 40-hour training? Currently, you'd have to go to the LexisNexis website to get this training, and any potential customer has to be law enforcement. You have to be able to show that you have law enforcement credentials to attend the 40-hour training or the subject matter expert class.
But I might have designed and developed that 40-hour training, and we're going to bring a lot of it to you guys here. So that's part of our citizens training. We're going to cover a ton of stuff over the course of the next year or so, where you're going to get a lot of the same information that they get there. We're just going to pair it up a little bit different.
Is Trax program part of law enforcement?
So no, the Trax program, I just built it and then I sold it to people. If you wanted to pay for it, back in the day, I was desperate. I had to pay my electric bill. I would sell it to you. However,
that's not true. He actually built Trax, like he was talking about earlier, to not the average Joe or smarter than the average Joe. He built it when he was a cop, and other agencies were taking advantage of it, and they kept asking him, hey, where do I get that? They didn't know Cy had built it, and then Cy realized I can probably make money off of this if I sold it to other law enforcement agencies around the country. And that's what happened. So it was a private entity.
The reason it's mainly or primarily a law enforcement tool is everything that the Trax program uses requires a search warrant. So to sell it to a civilian or to defense even at times, most of the times they won't be able to use it because they're going to have search warrant. Now, if they get evidence that's through discovery or some type of disclosure on a criminal case, then they can use it to double check.
So defense experts do use it, although they're not part of law enforcement. Defense experts have access to data that comes in from discovery, so they would be able to use Trax.
Yeah. And we still have defense experts around the country that are using Trax. Okay, Sally, does Trax allow your text messages to receive the... Oh, no. What you're talking about is a wiretap. Anything content, whether it's written or it's verbal audio, you can hear it. That requires a full wiretap. Trax did not have, for a lot of different reasons, we did not have a wiretap solution. We could see that you were sending a text, and we could see that you were sending that text in real time even. So we could see that you sent that text to, I don't know, your best friend, and we could see when it left your phone and when it arrived at the other phone and the cell tower that you used and the cell tower they used. But we don't get content. That is a whole different legal thing. I love this next question.
There's a lot of blood. Oh, yes, you can.
You can smell it, but it's not the smell. This is going to freak a lot of people out. I think I've been in maybe 4 scenes, 5 that I can think of.
Yeah.
You can taste it. When there's a lot of blood and it atomizes and you have some craziness that happened where there's just blood everywhere, it tastes like iron. So think of taking a little piece of aluminum foil, putting it in your mouth and kind of chewing on it a little bit. That aluminy iron smell, you get that in really, really bloody crime scenes. And there's times, I remember the first time it ever happened, we were briefing just outside of the door. I hadn't even walked into the house yet, but the front door is open. And I'm like, why do I taste iron? And then I got in the house and I realized it was just a bloodbath in there. But instead of smelling it, you can smell it. It does have a distinct smell. But that taste, once you have it, you will never forget it.
It just lingers in your mouth a bit for a while. Is Trax program protocol to use in training law enforcement, or do they have to have bought the program? You can take the Trax training. There are a lot of agencies who go to training before ever buying the program, simply because the training gives agencies or officers.
Well, we should clarify.
Go ahead.
The Trax program training is not on Trax. The training class is how to use cell phone records and cell phone geolocation in criminal investigations. And then Trax is the program that will help you do it better. We have several very, very large agencies throughout the country that have made the Trax training, which isn't necessarily Trax, but more of our cell phone training, mandatory to promote into investigations. So if you're a patrol officer and you want to become a detective, there's a number of agencies across the country that actually require this class for you to become a detective.
There are also a number of agencies across the country who've been to our cell phone training and use other platforms to map call detail records. Oh, thank you so much, Crimeland.
1122.
Thank you so much.
Wait. You got to hit me back. Why 1122? I'm going to think about it.
Yeah.
There's got to be something cool with that.
Would blood spatter, cast off, or pools be different? Someone has hemophilia.
No, the viscosity is the same. The way you bleed is different with hemophilia, but the viscosity is the same, and that's the big one. Oh, Meg.
Thank you, Meg.
Hey, $20. I want you to buy yourself something pretty.
I will. Thank you so much, Meg. We appreciate you. Have you had an investigation with infrared cameras and a difficulty identifying objects on the footage? If someone calls a cell phone and it rings until it goes to voicemail.
I just put Twiz's name on the chalkboard and with a little check mark.
Yeah.
I know where you're going with that, Twiz. Not doing it.
You're going to detention. If someone calls a cell phone and it rings until it goes to voicemail, can you identify the phone's location at the time of the call?
I'm still processing Twiz. Hang on. If someone calls a cell phone and it rings and goes to voicemail, can you identify the phone's location? It depends, Jen. Number one, is the phone actually on? Is it connected to the network? If the phone is on, so I'm going to give you two different scenarios. You see the incoming call. You don't want to talk to that person and you ignore it. Yes, we can absolutely determine the cell tower in the sector that handled your call. If your phone is off, we can't. Now, here's something really, really crazy, and this is why you have to have an expert look at this stuff because there's a lot of assumptions people make. Verizon had this really crazy thing for a while. Let's say that I'm in Atlanta and I buy my cell phone in Atlanta, and then I move to Arizona, but I have an Atlanta area code. When I don't answer my voicemail, it forwards them to a home cell site in Atlanta to record that voicemail. So the problem that was causing with Verizon is you would get a bunch of calls and all of a sudden I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, call, and then a call goes to voicemail and it shows me in Atlanta, Georgia, which obviously you look at the time frame, no one can get from Phoenix to Atlanta in that time frame. So it was obvious there was an error, but all of Verizon's network had this for a number of years where voicemails would default back to the home tower of wherever that phone was purchased and all of the other calls would be somewhere else. So with me saying, yes, you can, there are caveats that each provider has these really crazy nuances that can jack you up. Oh, look at this. Keri was right. See? Once again, I bow down to the queen.
Thank you, Madison.
Yeah, thanks, Madison. I love it when people
at the Gaylord
point
Rockies
out just
Resort.
how wrong I am. Moving on. Kelly, 1999. Thank you so much, Kelly. You guys are awesome. This is our side gig or our business. So these things actually are really important to us. I don't want that to be underscored there. Thank you so much.
How does he know whose GPS to be monitored?
You answer this one.
I'm going to let you answer this one.
I'm eating Keri.
I think we kind of covered this already.
So, Twiz, back in the olden days, Nellos would only activate GPS when the phone was actively using GPS, 911 navigation, and it could pull off of the chip. A simple fact, a lot of people probably don't realize, cell phone companies are not in the business to track you. Having your GPS on 24/7, where your phone is constantly pinging, those of you who've done a lot of traveling and using your navigation, but you don't have your phone plugged into your car, your battery dies really quick. Put your phone in GPS mode without plugging it in. Watch how hot it gets. Number one complaint of cell phone users is battery life. Your battery starts dying in 4 or 5 hours, you will bitch up a storm. You want a battery to last an entire day. So the iPhone, the Android devices are built to only use GPS when it's absolutely necessary. because constantly using GPS kills the batteries. Number one reason to dump your phone and go get a new phone. So the phone companies can't force your phone into GPS mode. They can only take advantage of it when your phone is in GPS mode. So back in the old days with Nellos, if I'm in navigation mode, my GPS chip is activated, AT&T has access to it, they can use it. 911 call automatically activates that GPS chip. But if I'm not doing anything with my phone that requires that GPS goes quiet and it saves my battery. So there's that.
And their activities from AT&T or Verizon has been uploaded on the databases from 2-3 without a warrant.
Can you see phones from there? Okay. Boy. Miss Potts. Hey, where have you been all night, by the way, Miss Potts?
It's good to see you.
And you know what? Update your picture. Can we see your eyes? There's something about it. You got to see the eyes.
She's just very,
very mysterious.
Yeah,
mysterious. Okay.
Shelf life.
Shelf life. Sorry, I got distracted. Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, you can get cell towers for about a year. So I can go back a year and still get your cell tower location. Depending on the case, depending on who you know, depending on your education in this field, I have been able to be involved with certain cases where we've been able to go back and get toll records, and I'll explain toll records in a minute, up to 7 years. And toll records are just date, time, who called who. That's all we get. We don't get any location. Yeah. So if we look at just toll records of who's calling who with the right case, and I need to advocate the right case. We're not doing this on fraud cases, but you give me a serial murder case and we can write the right type of search warrants and we can get the attention it needs. We can probably go back about 7 years. But as a good rule of thumb that we tell people, figure about a year.
Well, I think also with one specific location provider I can think of, you could go back
7.
years and years.
7.
Is it just 7?
We're gonna stick with 7.
Oh, we'll stick with 7.
We'll stick with 7.
Never mind.
I'm gonna help myself to some of Keri's Bordeaux here. Kelly, thank you so much. Super appreciate it. Is that twice? Kelly. Oh.
Thank you, Kelly.
Does blood smell? We hit that one.
Have you ever heard of a police radio being stored in a chemical lab?
Are you high, Twiz? What are you asking me? A chemical lab? What's a chemical lab? Like DuPont?
Meth?
The meth lab down the street? I'm sure there's probably a lot of meth labs that have a police radio listening to things. I don't know, Twiz. Hit me back. I'll clean it up. I'm not sure. Oh, yes. Yes, 100% Miss Potts. Luminol is old school. It was first version. Think of luminol as 1.0, and amino black was probably, I would say, 6.3. Like, it's much further down the line. The difference also is how it illuminates. Luminol was really, really picky. You had to have the perfect conditions of darkness. You had to have the right camera equipment, all that stuff. Amino black is so much better.
Can a PI get, I'm assuming Trax? No.
If you know somebody.
If you know somebody who can actually get you search warrants for call detail records, then yeah.
Jen, that's a great question. They were in a dead zone, 100%. However, I don't know if you've seen recently, and I want to say about 2 weeks ago, there's a person who just came out in Australia who thinks that they figured this out, and they've got some very convincing evidence. Google it if you haven't Googled it in the last couple of weeks. Google that. There's some updates to that Malaysia flight. Will there be a test? Yes, Meg, there will be a test at the end of it. I have testified in civil cases. A lot of times they're wrongful death cases. So what a lot of people doesn't know, and this is really good. Okay, hang on. Double tap. Pay attention, people. This is important. Get this information out. Knowledge is power. Let's say something crazy happens. Husband kills wife. Husband has some type of an estate. Let's not even say it's a lot. It's $500,000. The children can hire an attorney, sue the husband's estate for wrongful death. We got involved on a number of these cases back in the day where I would have a victim who's killed and then either family members or children would go after the perpetrator on a civil case. After we convict them criminally, we would then start the civil case. So I've testified on a number of those. I've also had a couple of doctors that I've had to testify to. Dr. Strokin. Is that episode 2?
That was episode 2.
Episode 2, Dr. Strokin is another good example of that one. If law enforcement, what are other programs? There's a lot of good programs out there. There's a program called CellHawk. There's a program called Nighthawk. I don't know what it is about hawks, but they like them. CellHawk, Nighthawk. There's a company called Penlink that does a lot. Penlink is more into the real-time wiretaps. There's a couple others, but they suck. There's also the FBI CAST team has their own product called CAST-Viz. CAST-Viz is free for law enforcement, and I'll just say you get what you pay for.
Does the cold affect blood?
Yes, 100%. Good question, Ro. We can tell to some extent how long pools of blood have coagulated, and that is dramatically impacted by temperature. So yes, I was going to say produce, but it's not. I would much rather work a crime scene in the cold with blood than I would in the heat. For sure.
A good example of coagulated blood is the case that we just did this past week.
The casing.
Yeah, where the casing is sitting in the pool of blood, but you can see the coagulation of the blood with the dark veining. Are there any laws requiring
Good question, Strong Healer.
Blood?
No, and this is really, really important. This was a big issue in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I'm dating myself here. There was a time as a police officer I could walk into the emergency room and I could tell nurses, hey, if you're taking blood, here's another vial, fill that one while you're at it. The rule of thumb back then was I couldn't force a nurse to take blood, but if they were taking blood for other reasons and I was standing there, I could get a sample. That has completely changed. If we are seizing blood as evidence, I have to have a search warrant. The only exception to that is victim. And with the victim's blood, we can always take it because it's what's called implied consent. If the victim was conscious and could consent, they would allow us. Now, at the same time, I've had cases where we've had victims transported to the hospital. They don't want to be a victim. They tell me to go screw myself, and I'm out. I can't do anything. So you have to have consent if the victim's conscious. If the victim's unconscious, you can take it. If there's any chance that person's a suspect, you have to have a search warrant.
This is a really interesting question, though, to think about as we get into constitutional confusion on Wednesday. If you have to have a search warrant for blood, why wouldn't you need it for?
I'm not going to go there right now, Keri. You and Twiz, hey, Twiz, where I told you a little bit ago, your name went on the chalkboard. Keri's just went on there with you with a check mark.
Tune into constitutional confusion.
Yeah, you guys are going to want to watch this week. I'm telling you, we're dropping a bomb. Lady Di, what cell phone provider do you receive better data from once it's extracted? Okay, here's something really important, Lady Di. We don't extract data. So there's two types of cell phone data. Extracted data is where I have the actual phone. Oh, look at my phone, by the way. Look at my beautiful wife. Anyway, where I have the actual phone and I use some type of tool that I plug it in and I can extract everything from the phone. That is more on the forensic side. We do not do that. I'm not smart enough to figure out forensic extracts. We look at specific cell phone communications through the cell phone providers, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, whoever else might be out there. So when we get the phone records, that's what we're looking at. So just change extracted to once we get the records from the phone carriers. They all have their caveats. There was a long time ago, I loved Verizon. Verizon definitely had the best location data. T-Mobile was by far the worst. That is kind of flip-flopped. We've seen some great improvements from T-Mobile the last few years. AT&T just overtook everybody. And contrary to popular belief, it was before 2023, but AT&T has timing data, they have Locabor or Nellos data, and they have their call detail records. And when you combine all three of those, AT&T is the most accurate currently today. Man, that could always change tomorrow. I don't even know what I did. Twiz, you're asking me questions that potentially people could read into. So was Keri just now. So yeah,
I didn't ask a question. I made a statement.
Yes, for you. Oh, thank you.
Thank you
we got
so
it,
much, Kelly. Biggest frustrations that you can help that you know.
It's a good question, Keri or Terry. What is your biggest frustration?
What is one of your biggest frustrations
I have the answer for this
can
one.
Help law enforcement? For me personally, it's the databases that are not available for specific types of crimes for law enforcement networks across the country. They're agency specific information only.
And so easy to fix.
Yeah.
Information sharing is a really good one. Terry, for me, I've said this a couple times. I don't know if you ever heard this, and I might be repeating myself for a handful of you. The number one challenge in law enforcement, if we had to look at law enforcement across the world, not just the United States, but law enforcement across the world, what is the number one thing that impacts investigations and impacts the ability to do what we want from law enforcement? And it's ego. My biggest frustration is, and it's a small percentage, I would say 20 to 25% of law enforcement, you get this ego that you cannot get past. And there's a lot of cases out there today that aren't solved or are subject to never being properly prosecuted because of ego. So my biggest frustration is, man, check the ego. We all need help. If you think 2 eyes are good looking at a case, I guarantee you 10 is better. So that's ours. Hey, Tommy, what's up?
Hi, Tommy.
Yes, Tommy, I will tell you, you better know your P's and Q's when it comes to staging crime scenes with blood spatter. Unless you're an expert, and even then it's going to be really, really hard to do. Don't try it. Just don't commit that crime.
Just commit the crime and go.
Yeah, just run. Burn the house down. Yes, we have done a number of cases all over the world. We've done some stuff in Australia. We've done some stuff in the UK. Flying High Helena, I don't know where in the UK you are. I'm going to go outside the UK a little bit. There was a case maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
She's asking if we can track it when she's in the US.
Oh, we can track you in and out of the US.
Yeah. If your phone is connecting to device or to cell sites in the US, we can track that. But we can also track your device in other parts of the world. In the UK. Well.
We did a case, like I said, 5 or 6 years ago. You guys, when I say you guys, I think of UK as all of Europe. I know that's terrible. It's such an American thing to do. But there was a case around Germany, maybe a little bit of France, where a gang was basically going around robbing supermarkets from their ATM machines, but they would burn the supermarket down to hide all the evidence. And they actually ended up killing somebody and burning one of these stores down. And we helped track that phone.
We also had a case in Australia.
Yeah, they were stealing the cop cars. What if I say I called 911 an interview? I don't know. I've had this. There is a company in Colorado called Intrado. Intrado is the background of the 911 system throughout the entire country. Any call that goes through 911, whether it connects to dispatch, whether it connects to anything else, if 911 is dialed and it's sent through the system, Intrado is the first connection point that it hits. So I've had 2 cases where we had to go to Intrado to actually show the routing of that call. So there's ways to do it, but man, it's going to take a lot of work to get it there. Yes, Maddie, this is kind of interesting. A lot of police departments actually started donation boxes where you can go and donate your old phone, and then they would give them to domestic violence victims so that they could basically go buy a new SIM card and use that phone. But yes, you can have a phone that is completely outside of service, give it to somebody, and as long as it's charged, it'll still call 911. The FCC actually mandated well over a decade ago that all phones have to be able to connect 911 regardless of the account suspension or not. Yes, smarter than your average Joe. We've had a number of cases. The one that I would refer to that's just a little bit more well-known that I don't want to get too far into details is we can do a lot with Wi-Fi too. So if you're used to or you're very familiar with kind of the IoT side of the house and all of the Wi-Fi connections, we can track those. There's a couple different devices we've had and worked with that we can do some really cool stuff with that.
Have you ever climbed a telephone pole?
Nope. Not going. I hate heights. I can't do heights to save my life. I had to go up on the roof today to put our cellular antenna so that, hey, I don't think we're skipping that much tonight. So maybe things are working.
Maybe things are better.
I know. And we don't see landlines. Your grandma has a landline. That's the only person I know that has one.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Very nice. Oh, and look at Luna.
Liz, thank you so much for your $19.99. We appreciate
wait.
you.
Yeah, Liz, thank you so much. That is awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Liz.
For people buying those phones, silence. Oh, Faraday bags. Not so much. Aluminum foil, just a lot of it will do the same thing. The problem is, like I said, it's no longer a cell phone. So if you have it in there, there's not much you can do to it. It just keeps it from being erased.
Cell phone intrusion detectable.
Yes. Depending on what you mean by that. That is such an open-ended question. Hit me back with more.
Possible for you to find out if someone's phone was cloned.
Oh, yes.
And that cloned phone data was used to implicate the wrong person.
Yes, that is something we used to see a long time ago. The networks actually, it became such an issue on stealing service that the networks have some things now that prevent clone phones. That is very much like a late 90s, mid 2000 issue. We don't see that anymore. It is so hard to clone a phone. Basically, your phone has two identifiers, an IMSI, IMSI, and an IMEI, IMEI. They're very unique, very required identifiers for your phone to work on the network. The cell phone networks actually have this little tool now that if it ever sees two of them at the same time, it kills it. So very, very difficult to do.
Why does take care?
They're very busy, Twins. Very busy. Very busy.
Yes.
Yes, I'll send it to you later. I don't have it like handy right here.
Can GIS software be used in conjunction with drone mapping tech to track people's locations hypothetically by someone with nefarious intent?
Okay, I'm going to share a little thing with everybody really quick. I'm going to go really
Ms.
fast.
Potts, what do you do?
Yeah, I think she's a spook. You with the
Yeah.
CIA? So in 2016, we built, and I think I've mentioned this before, we built a drone detection system that was used by the NFL in the Super Bowl. What a lot of people don't realize is your cell phone is constantly probing out, looking for Wi-Fi connections. So if you think about it, you have your Wi-Fi on, you leave your house, you're using cellular. When you come back home, you don't manually go into your phone and reconnect to your Wi-Fi. It just does it for you. And the reason it does it for you is your phone is constantly pinging. Depending on the make and model and brand of your phone, it can be every couple seconds, it can be every 30 seconds, it can be every 5 minutes. But your phone is sending out the signal saying, hey, here I am. Here's my identifiers. Do I know you? And if you think about it, I've logged onto my Wi-Fi at my house, my daughter's house, my work. Maybe there's a place I go.
Starbucks.
Our local bar, like whatever it might be. So as soon as I walk in there, my phone just connects. It's called probing. Your phone probes nonstop. Well, in that probe information is a little number that can only come back to your phone. When we built that system, we were looking at those probes and we could actually track everybody's phone that came to the Super Bowl. And even if you go into airplane mode, your phone is still probing because it's on the Wi-Fi side. I'm not going to get too far in the weeds, but your phone can absolutely be tracked outside of your cellular signal. And there's all kinds of ways that we can do it. We use drones on a handful of different things. And I know there's a bunch of stuff out there. You can absolutely track people's locations. There's a lot of search and rescue tools, for example, that are built with drones where you can go out into an area where there is no cell phone service, but somebody has their phone, that probing is happening, and we can actually find like lost hikers and stuff. So kind of some cool stuff there. Good enough to get away with it. Not if you have the right experts, Tommy. That's, and I'm going to say this with pretty much any case. It depends on who's investigating, not who's committing the crime. You get the right investigators, you shelf that ego and you get enough of the right investigators, I would say no. But you get somebody with a lot of ego who doesn't want to get outside of their wheelhouse or outside their circle very, very easily. So two sides there. This chat's way too. Oh, stop it, OCD. I've seen some of your stuff. I actually stalked you a little bit last week. You're full of it.
I was going to ask a question, but just go ahead.
Can't wait for the. Yes, stupid to do too. Yes, wait till next week. Hit us next week. We'll do another one Sunday. No, they stole it from me. They don't like me.
He doesn't even have access to the system anymore. Like he doesn't have a login.
I've got a new system that's so much better, but that's you're going to get me in trouble. Entrado, yes, I think is it E or I? Ms. Potts, I got to look. It might be I instead of E, but yes, Entrado. They're out of Denver. Super cool story. The owner is Stephen Meir, M-E-E-R. He was a reserve deputy when he built Entrado. A super good dude. He's in it for the right reasons. He just wants to help people. Great company, great person. I've worked with him on a number of cases. Awesome guy.
Thank you, Deborah.
Is that twice? No,
I don't know. Maybe we've seen it before. Maybe we saw it pop up in our regular feed.
So
but
cool,
it's
Deborah.
in our starred now. Thank you, Deborah. about Wi-Fi? Does your phone just automatically
strongest signal, Anna? Like in our house, especially as I was playing today, we have 3 different Wi-Fis I'm playing with to get our best streaming for you guys. And I would notice as I'm moving around, whichever one I would get closest to, my phone would automatically jump to. So whichever ones you have logged in your phone as approved, like password ones, and then whichever one is strongest at that moment. Yep, she's a spook. I knew it. Spooky, spooky.
What has been collected? Collected forensic tests.
So yes, that's a really complex question because how long was it stored in the vial? Anybody who's gone and given blood, notice they have that little bit of goo that's in the bottom of the vials. In order to keep the blood preserved in a way that it can be tested, they have to put that stuff in there that would absolutely be detectable. I think if you put blood in a vial and you store it for like a week or 2 and then you smear it, it would be very obvious. Hey, that's our last one on the start.
Thanks, Brutally Honest. That was a great question.
580.
And I haven't seen Brutally Honest pop up anywhere,
Yeah.
so she's new for us.
Okay. It's never good when Sai says he's stalking you. It's a good stalking.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just super into you, OCD. Like, come on. You ask good questions, so I'm like, hey, who's this OCD shaggy guy?
I think people don't realize we actually stalk a lot of people online, especially when they make bad comments, and then we have to hold ourselves back quite a bit once we start stalking them. So how about from a body bag?
Possibly. Yeah, I've got to get more details, Tommy. I don't ever want to say never because people get really creative out there. I'd have to see it.
Not Twiz. This is a great question, I think.
You think this is a great question?
No, it was a different one.
Oh.
Hold on. Where did it go?
Oh, hang on. I want to hit this one.
There you go. Mercy Cat. Yeah, that's who the question is.
Another channel claims you are only allowed to testify for the prosecution while employed by LexisNexis. Is this true? Well, let me tell you, Mercy Cat. Number one, nobody, to include Keri, and this is a conversation we can have later on, has ever told me who to or who not to testify for.
I have not ever said that.
I've had cases where you've been like, are you sure? I've had cases where you have been hesitant for me to get involved with.
Yeah, but then I encouraged you to.
Yeah. Once I explained it. But what I'm getting at,
you can't just drop a bomb of.
Yeah, but you telling me not to, I don't know that would changes my point.
Well, no, and I would never tell you.
That's
not
what I'm
to.
saying. But even if you're like, hey, I don't think you should do this one, and I felt really strongly about it, I would still do it. Like, you know that. That's why you.
But I typically feel more strongly than you about something.
Yeah, you do. That's total bunk, Mercy Cat. Let me just put it that way. I actually testified for the defense just before the acquisition, and technically I've reviewed a lot of cases for what a lot of people don't realize is all of my testimony while employed by the LexisNexis was on my own. It wasn't done through LexisNexis. It wasn't billed through LexisNexis. This other channel has no idea how things work, so you can just tell them they're completely full of it. I testified on a number of cases that I did for free. I haven't charged for my testimony since 2021.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, all the testimony I've done from 2021 going forward has been completely pro bono because I'm in a situation that, hey, I just want to do the right thing. I don't have to be paid for it, and sometimes it's a bigger challenge getting paid than anything else. So,
do we need to stalk somebody named Viviana? Looks like we do.
So Viviana doesn't know everything. I would say maybe she doesn't know anything.
Who is Viviana? Like, what is her background?
Yeah, I don't know much about that. Yeah, so a lot of times that I get involved, it just has nothing to do with anything. And
it's not stalking if we don't know about it. It's true. Good. Thank you, Kay. Lucky you're right.
Yeah, it's interesting too. We're new to this world. We're really, really new to this world, and it's really shocked me just how fast people will latch onto something in the YouTube world as gospel and really not know anything about it. So,
too many seconds.
Yeah, smarter than the average Joe is actually smarter than the average Joe.
I wonder if he really looks like his profile.
Oh, wait. Wife, help me.
¿Dónde está Elisa? Where is Elisa?
That's why.
I don't know.
All right. What else do we have? Did we cover everything? Oh, wait. We got more now. We used that one.
Yeah, no, I think we're good. What can be done regarding that unfortunately bad guy?
What constitutes a bad question? This is actually really good. VGD. I have three.
I don't know where this.
I have 3 cases right now that are under fairly severe gag orders, and what I mean by that gag order is they've lifted the veil. I've seen things that the average person has not seen. If I comment on things that can be twisted later on that you were talking about this, and the only reason you knew about that was because you had seen this particular piece of evidence, and the only reason you saw that evidence is because you're under this gag order, you violated the gag order, it's actually a misdemeanor. I could be arrested for it. So I have to be really, really careful with that. There are certain times where I can split it and it's not a big deal, and I feel very comfortable with it because I can apply it to other cases. And then sometimes there's questions that come up where it's hard for me to answer that question because it's very unique in the questions that have to do with current cases that I'm under a gag order. It puts me in a really awkward situation. So I have to be really careful with that. The reason I ask is, yes, a man have been a victim of dying. I've also been raised to question everything when it could. Yes, 100% VGD. And let me make something really clear. Bad questions are only from this point until that gag order is released. Trust me, I take meticulous notes. I collect my receipts. I'm very, very clear. All of this will come out at some point. All of these questions will be answered. I just need to do it in a way that doesn't get me arrested. I got arrested once this year already. I'm not going to get arrested again.
It was last year.
Arrested. No, it wasn't. It was this year. Oh, it was last year.
It was last year.
Keri got me arrested last year, so I can't do that again. I'm just not as limber as I used to. Trying to get my arms behind my back, it hurt. Oh, Mercy Cat.
Thank you, Mercy Cat. And tell the pups hello.
Oh, Mercy. Now I remember. You're the one that has the Rottweilers that actually sit down when they hear the show. I love that.
Good boy.
Love that.
Yeah. Have you been involved for an icicle?
Icicle. No,
not in Arizona.
I have not. We have icicles.
Well, where we're at.
Okay, I fruited Keri this week. As soon as it freezes up here and I get an icicle, I'm going to try to stab Keri. I'll do it like somewhere like maybe in your leg or something.
My fingertip.
Yeah, I'll try to stab Keri later this year. We'll film that one too. And while we're talking about that, why don't we go ahead and I know some people miss this, so let me fix that. Oh, hey, Bree, can you? Oh, wait, that's me. It's not you. Sorry, Bree.
Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Yeah, we'll review the fruiting as we kind of wrap this up here. We never got mugshots. They realized we weren't the suspects, right? We might have been falsely arrested.
They held my phone hostage to make us drive to a place where they could search our vehicle illegally.
And they kind of dusted us off in this. They realized they probably arrested. Thanks, JB.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight and spending time with us.
Stop, poor Keri. Stop it.
Thank you, Lenore. I appreciate your passion for me.
All right. So for this week, as we kind of wrap up with Keri getting fruited here, you're going to see her act out here, though. This is so my wife right now. How dare you throw a tomato at me? Take that. And she did actually hit me with that tomato.
Thank you, Maddie. We appreciate you.
Don't miss this week. Seriously, I know I don't ever want us to get into the realm where we're hyping things just over and over. Like it's no longer hype. This week's episode constitutes not just for anything currently, but long term, the implications of what we're talking about is huge to law enforcement. All right, thank you guys very much.
KFC.
We are going to go eat our.
Thanks, Shaggy.
All right, have a great night. guys so much. Hey, supers, you guys killed it tonight. It's so cool to see. We really, really appreciate it.
No, definitely not one of her beauty tips, Quiz. Thank you. To make it through. Good night, everybody.
Awesome.
Stay safe.